Okay guys, welcome to your third and last Excel workshop using categorical data. Now in this extra task, which you are doing because you did the other two tutorials really quickly, so well done for that. In this one I'm just going to show you some more advanced functions. So previously we tried to get a frequency table that shows us the distribution of the different chocolate bars, how many times they were chosen by staff and students in this hypothetical data set. And we did that by sorting this data, getting rid of the empty cells where people hadn't responded with all of the answers, and then just manually essentially highlighting all of the cells that said bounty and writing down the number of times that occurs. Now we can do the exact same thing but in a much quicker way, and it's also a good way of showing you a little bit more about how Excel works. Okay, so when it comes to anything you want to do in Excel, the help function is really good. So you can usually look up things in a forum, so you can just go on your browser, go onto Google and search for the things you want to do in Excel, or you can just go straight into the help function here as well. So what we want to do essentially is we want to count the values in the cells. Okay, we want to count how many times values occur in the different cells here, or how many times words occur. And if you just type in here, counting content in cells, okay, so that's technically what you want to do, and you can just get help on this, and it already sort of gives you some suggestions as to what you might want to do and different functions. Okay, so what are the different ways to count values in a worksheet? You can use the auto sum function or the sum function, which is what we did earlier when we wanted to know the total number of times or total number of staff and students that answered the questionnaire. But it also tells you about another couple of functions. And the one I want to show you today is the COUNTIF function. And if you just look at the sort of brief description here, it says that it gives you the group of cells you want to count and the description of what you want to count within that range. So if you click on that here, the help box sort of comes up on the side, and it should give you an overview of what the COUNTIF function does and how it works. So according to this, the COUNTIF function is essentially a statistical function that counts the number of cells that meet a specific criterion. So if, for example, the number of cells that say a particular word. And that's exactly what we want to do, because we want to know how many times the bounty, for example, was chosen by people. And essentially what it does is you type COUNTIF, which is the name of the function, and then in the brackets you want to tell Excel where do you want to look. Okay, so where are you counting and what do you want to look for? So in our example, we want to count down here, okay, how many times the different chocolate bars occur. Now we want to do that separately for staff and students. So what we should definitely do first is to sort our data again by staff and students, so we get that separately. And we can do that just like we did before, so this is just a bit of a reminder of how this works. So we want to sort the data by respondent, and then click OK. Okay, but now the chocolate bars are still in a random order. And in this range, we now want to know how many times the word bounty occurred. So you can see in the help function, that's just what I wanted to show you, there's examples for what it does, there's tutorials on this, so the Excel help is really excellent, and it goes for the other Microsoft Office programs as well. Okay, so let's get rid of this for now, and I'll show you how this is done. Okay, so for example, within staff members, which occur first, okay, so like before, we have all of the staff members listed first and then all of the students afterwards. And we want to know how many times the word bounty appears in this data. So what we want to do, as always, in Excel, we want to go equals, and then in this case, the function was called COUNTIF. And then you can either double click or you can open a bracket manually. And the first thing it prompts you to do is it says, now I need to know the range. So this is, where do you want to search? Now we want to search in all of the answers given by staff members. So I'm going to highlight all of these cells. Oops, gone a bit too far. All of the cells where the respondent was a staff member. Okay, go back up. And now it says it wants a comma, which is there. So I'll type a comma. And now it wants to know the criteria. So now one important thing is that when you're telling Excel what you want to look for, you need to put that in inverted commas. Okay, so on your keyboard, that's the Shift button and then the number 2. Shift and 2 gives you the inverted commas. And now you want to type the name of the criterion that you're looking for. So in this case, bounty. Okay, so again, inverted commas to close the bracket. And now you've told Excel, in this range, in these cells, I want to know how many times the word bounty occurs. And the answer is 10, just like before. So you can do that technically for all of the others, and you can just keep typing the same function. Okay, so COUNTIF, open bracket, highlight the range, all of the staff members, comma, and then what we want to look for. And in this case, that's Snickers. That's 14 times. Okay, now, but instead of actually having to type this function over and over again, we can do something that Excel is also very good at, which is to transfer the function that is in this cell into these other cell. And this is what this little button is for down here. So at the lower right edge of each of the cells, when you highlight it, there is this little box. And if you hover the cursor over that, it gives you that little plus. And that means you can now press on your mouse and you can drag that formula all the way across to apply the same function to all of these cells. Okay, let's just drag it by 1. Now, what Excel does though is it applies that function, but it automatically moves your range across to the next cell. Okay, so in this case, we selected this range right here, which is from B2 all the way down to B84. Okay, what it's done into the cell that we've dragged it into is it's moved that selection 1 to the side, which is the direction in which we moved our cursor as well. And let me show you what happens if you drag this function down by 1. It then actually moves the selection down by 1 as well. Now, quite often that's actually really useful, but in this case it's actually wrong because it moves the selection into the wrong area of our spreadsheet. And one way to avoid Excel doing that is to just simply lock the selection in place. And the way that's done is using the $ on your keyboard. So you just, again, Shift and the number 4 creates the $. And if you move the $, say in front of the column, okay, the column is B, so we want to stay in column B, and then we do the same thing that we did before, and we drag this to the right. The selection is now in the same place where it was before. And the same works if you do if we now drag this down, the same thing happens that did before, okay? It's still moving the selection 1 down because we haven't locked the row selection in place. We can do that by, again, putting a $ also in front of the row, which is 2, and then 84. Now this looks confusing, but that's exactly what you need to do if you want to keep the selection exactly the same. Okay, so now the selection has stayed in place. So we'll delete this for now. The only other thing you need to do is, obviously it's moved over everything from the previous cell, but in this cell we actually want to count the Galaxy caramels. Okay, so this is Galaxy caramel, and all we need to do to get that is to change what's in the inverted commas here. So we'll change that to Galaxy caramel, and there you go, that's 10. Okay. we can actually do that, drag it all the way across, and then just in each of these cells, change what we're looking for, and we get the correct number right away. So really nice and simple, and much, much quicker than the way we did it before. You might notice that it's not case sensitive, okay? So you can type Milky Way with the caps at the start, or just all lower caps as well. And we do Twix, and so on. Okay. In this case, we can actually just delete the caramel part, and we have the Mars bars. There you go. Now you can do the same for the students, but obviously you then need to change the selection. So we don't want B2 to be 84 actually. What we want is, and I can show you that, drag it down. You can also just manually change this. We can have a look where we are in this data set. We want B85 all the way down to B167. So we could literally just type that in here. If you know where you are in your data set, it works that way as well. 167. And now if you look at the selection, so just click on there, it's moved that box into the right place and highlighted all of the cells that we need. Okay, and then you could just do exactly the same thing that we did before. Make sure you lock the columns in place with your dollar signs, and then drag this across and change the name in the actual selection, and you would have your lovely frequency table. Okay, so that was just another thing that I wanted to show you. First of all, the COUNTIF function, just as an example of a function, I wanted to show you the help function. So using the Excel help is actually really important. It's really useful. If you're looking for an answer to something, and if it's not in there, you just Google it, and there'll be a forum somewhere where someone has found out how to do something in Excel. So don't be shy if you don't know how to do something to ask the internet or ask Microsoft Help, which is really useful. Then I also wanted to show you how to drag formulas from one cell into another, and how to avoid the selection, that range that you've selected, to be dragged with you. Like I said, that's quite often very useful, but not always. And then obviously also just generally how you deal with categorical data, in this case, how you create a frequency table relatively much quicker than doing it manually. Okay, next week we're going to talk about measurements. We're going to start to calculate other things, and until then, hopefully you'll have a little bit of a practice and play around with Excel in your own time as well.